Hello there, everyone, and we are going to go through the first wave of immigration questions. And again, so basically when we talk about waves of immigration, during different times of immigration, different things were going on. People coming from different places, different rules. So this first wave is what we call pre-1820. Now this means before 1820. Now this is a interesting time because up until 1790, it was a British colony. And then after from the 1780s, 1790s, you had the beginnings of the United States. Of course, when we talk about immigration, we first need to recognize that there was a group of people that had arrived in North America long before any other Europeans, and that is going to be your Native Americans. Now, a number of people had the Vikings. The Vikings had arrived, but they did not actually stay. Their colonies really didn't stick. So the group of people, I guess it was talking about here, was the Native Americans. Now, one of the things we find that brought a lot of people here during the first wave is people who wanted to get here couldn't afford to get here, so they would agree to be what's called an indentured servant. And this is basically when you agree to be someone's slave. You work for them in exchange for getting here. People traded different numbers of years, but the normal was 4 to 7 years of work. So you would basically say, if you pay for me to get to the United States, I will be, I work for you and you don't have to pay me. So you're basically working off your passage. That was eventually made illegal because it was so close to slavery, but it was how a lot of people were able to get here. Okay? During the early American colonies, if you took a look at the chart that was on that, you see that the largest number of people came from Great Britain. And that includes the numbers you'll see for England and Scotland. They made up over half of the people that arrived during this time. The second largest groups were Africans. We're going to talk more about them in a little bit. And then you did have people of Dutch, Swedish, a few Germans, although not near as many as are going to come later. They also were here in smaller numbers. And if you look back to the colonies, you'll see different areas of the colonies were settled by different groups of people. In some areas, you'll find lots of Dutch, some lots of Swedish, some lots of German. But the biggest was England and Scotland. Now, a huge part of this time period, a group that came in large numbers, were the African slaves. So a large number of the first immigrants, in fact, I want to say it was close to 30% of the people that came during this time came as slaves. So they were captured and brought aboard slave ships and worked in places all over the United States for a while, and then again gradually in the South. Now, the last part, from 1790 to 1820, so in the first 30 years of the United States, I asked for one law that was passed and described what the law stated, and I was talking about immigration law. A few of you, I didn't make that very clear, so if you had something else, that's fine. But a couple things I wanted to note here. In 1790, the first U.S. law said all whites were welcome. So basically, if you were from Europe, and I don't remember, there was a little other wording to it, but it was basically one of the things we're going to see throughout U.S. immigration history, that it isn't always a fair practice. It isn't always, yeah, sure, everybody can come or nobody can come. A lot of times it was pick and choose who they wanted. And they, right away in the first law, they indicated that whites were welcome. During this time, slave trading was made illegal, which meant no new slaves could be brought. But many slaves still here. So that outlawed any new slaves from being brought, but that didn't change the fact that there was a large number of African Americans living here in slavery. In 1820, something called the Steerage Law required ships to provide both documentation and healthier immigrant passengers. Oops. And actually, it is this law that is going to end up being part of the reason Rivka was denied coming. Is this law made it the responsibility of the steamship, or not the steamship, these were sailing ships back then. They were required to keep better documentation, and what was happening is they were bringing people to the United States in just horrible condition, really sick, often infested with diseases. And so the United States passed a law and said, if you're going to provide passage here, you need to provide decent conditions and documentations to bring healthier people here. Okay? So that sums up wave 1. I think I'm going to just do a separate video here for wave 2.